Welcome, my friends, to the Sage of Quay Radio Hour, your home for free and critical thinking, and I'm your host, Mike Williams. And joining me for this show is my blog partner, Al Williams. Tonight, our very special guest and friend is Robert Morningstar. Robert is a civilian intelligence analyst and psychotherapist in New York City. He received a degree in psychology from Fordham University. He's an expert in Chinese language, history, and martial arts. He's an FAA licensed pilot and instrument ground instructor with 23 years of flying experience. Robert has studied the paranormal and UFOs for over 40 years and has published many research articles on the internet exposing the government cover-up and deception in the JFK assassination. His work is cited in major books on the assassination, notably in Paris Flammonde's The Assassination of America and Conspiracy Science by Professor James Fetzer. In tonight's show, Robert will take us on a fascinating behind-the-scenes ride of the conspiracy which took John F. Kennedy's life, an event which many consider to be a major turning point in our nation's history. As part of our discussion, Robert explains how he came upon missing frames from the Zapruder film and how these frames tell a completely different story of what went down in Dealey Plaza on November 22, 1963. For the next 2 hours, we'll uncover the players, the motives, and the beneficiaries of the JFK assassination, and wrap up with Robert's insights on UFOs and humanity's path going forward. And so without further ado, here's Robert.
Did you get the images I sent you?
I did, and I was looking at them. Yep. Very interesting.
Yeah, man. Here's the deal. Well, I have a complete understanding of the grassy knoll shot of the... As I said last year, right? I said it was an optical illusion. The Zapruder film was a mass hallucination, intentionally engineered.
Right.
To bemuse, befuddle, all of us. And God works through Google. As I was waiting to be interviewed by George Noory on November 22nd, 2013, the 50th anniversary, I had a choice. You know, I was up on 7 o'clock, I was on Far Out Radio with Scott Teeters. And then at 4 o'clock with George Noory, 4 in the morning. So am I going to go to sleep, take a rest? Or am I going to, break night? And I said, man, this is the 50th anniversary. I'm going to drink a lot of coffee. And I'll brush up on all my facts. And in the middle of this, vigil, Google drops something on my desktop out of the blue. And it was a version of the Zapruder film that I'd never seen before. And I said, what the hell? I'll see it for a millionth time. Click. And I go, my God, this is different. And then when the grassy knoll part came, of which I've sent you some of the missing frames, I reacted in the most human way. I was aghast at what I saw. And I realized instantly that I had found the missing frames of the Zapruder film. And by that I mean I did deconstruct the optical illusions, but we didn't have the details of what was really taken out. And what was taken out was Jackie Kennedy's amazing reaction, her incredible courage, her boundless love for Jack in that last moment of his life.
Yeah.
The most beautiful thing I can imagine is one single frame after he's been shot once and twice. She's the guy says she hugs him. She embraces him with both arms. And she did it twice. The first time she came over and put her arm around him when he was gagging, choking with the bullet in the throat. And she was like, Jack, what is wrong? So she put her arm around him. And then the shot came and she, recoiled at the shock. And when she saw him wounded, she jumped on him and hugged him with both arms. And in that moment, she looked up to see who's hurting my husband, And then they kept shooting. There were more than 2 shots at the grassy knoll. There were 4 shots at the grassy knoll. And that's when Connolly finally got it. Connolly wasn't shot at 224. He may have been hit in the wrist at 295, but he wasn't hit for good, the back shot going through him. And that back shot did go through both men. It went through the back of Jack Kennedy's head and continued on and hit Connolly. But that shot came from the Criminal Records Building, and that's the vapor trail. That's the second shot of the guy who left the vapor trail at Z295. Have I given you that photo?
Nope.
I'm going to give it to you. You have to include it because that's key. So the key to this mystery, and which absolves Oswald completely, is the vapor trail at Z295, the kill shots beginning at Z313. Okay, that's 18 frames. That's 18 frames of film, 1 second.
Yeah.
Nobody could shoot 2 shots, unless they had an automatic rifle, like as I said, an M16 in those days. Go boom, a 3-shot burst, it's called.
Yeah.
The M16 has three levers, single, 3-shot burst, and auto. With 3-shot burst, you pull the trigger once and 3 shots come out.
Right.
That was my explanation. That's what I felt was the explanation, that it was one gun, one automatic weapon, or semi-automatic, that was used there.
Now, Robert, when you say that the Zapruder film came to you through Google...
Mm-hmm. Oh, the algorithm. Here, look.
Okay, how did that happen? Yeah.
How did it happen? God works through Google is what my saying is. God works through Google. This algorithm that everyone's afraid of. Oh my God, Google's tracking everything I do, every email I send, every website I visit, everything I buy. And, well, ain't that reality? So there are 2 ways to look at it. Big brother, right, and big bad brother, or bad big brother and good big brother, right? And I think that God works through Google, because in my life, in the last year in particular, these Google drops, like the algorithm just putting something in your desktop to attract your attention or do something. Well, it's happened many times, and lunar discoveries, lunar anomalies, and this one is the top one, and I've kept it secret for a year because it is so shocking, it is so gruesome, that I can tell you the Zapruder film is sanitized and, made clean because the act was so vile, so dirty, so filthy. And on top of it now, I realized there was a double killing that they were doing with the Zapruder film. They killed the president, they covered up his murder, but then they destroyed Jackie's reputation and credibility. See? By removing her actual movements, they made her look like a panic-stricken woman. And right now, I'm going to show you what was basically deleted. Imagine the film is running, if you believe the FBI count of 18 frames per second. 18 frames per second, and a body goes... like that. Okay? So you've seen the movements with the arm motion. So what happens if you take out the arm movements and you only go, right?
Right.
That's those. See, the lean in, to put the arm around, lean back to look, and then the lunge forward, holding the man as he's hit by 2 more shots, and her hair, I have 1 frame, her hair went flying, tracing the bullet right to Connolly. And so she held on to Jack Kennedy in this protective, loving embrace, really like a lioness, until 2 more shots went through him and the man's head just deflated like a balloon. And then she turned around quite naturally. She turned around quite naturally like this, and she put 1 arm on the backrest, 2nd arm, turned on her hip, turned on her knees, and crawled out like a cat. They cut some of that out to make it look, as I said, she let go, she reached over, put her hand on the body and the backrest, and then crawled out. They took that out, and it makes her look like she went, slapped the body away. You see?
Yeah, they did try afterwards to defame her.
They defamed her, yes. You see, it's very interesting because, I spoke to you about the whole thing about conspiracy theories.
Right.
And so I wrote an article, Conspiracy Science, to rehabilitate the word conspiracy, because I pointed out that the act existed before the word was coined for it. And the first one was, the first assassination in history was the assassination of Osiris. And ISIS and Osiris were all involved in this beginning of history. The beginning of American Western history begins with the assassination, really, of Osiris. And in a sense, the end of history, the book end of history, involves the same archetypes that were staged into this religious pageant, which was the murder of JFK, where JFK is in the coffin, the limousine, and ISIS is in there with him, you see, killed by his twin, Set.
Yeah.
His twin brother, Set, kills him. So this arcane religious pageant was engineered by very, very diabolically ingenious people.
Well, a lot of people, too, have a hard time getting their heads wrapped around the fact that there is all this ritual around these events.
Oh, yes.
You know, and
human sacrifice is what it is.
Yeah.
And listen to this. If you go to the Bible, into the Old Testament, and you go to the Pentateuch, I believe it's in Leviticus, when they talk about the sacrifice, the ritual sacrifice, it's a triple sacrifice. They slay a bull, they slay a lamb, and they slay a goat. See? And the goat is the scapegoat.
Scapegoat, right.
Upon whom all the sins of the community are cast upon him to take them on, and then dispatched to die in the wilderness. Well, right there, you have the bull, John F. Kennedy, the goat, obviously Oswald, and the sheep, sacrificial lamb, was Jack Ruby.
Right.
Now, I found out in the last year, I have discovered, as God works through Google, and then I work with him, there's a fabulous website that I want to recommend to everyone. It's called The Portal to Texas History. The Portal to Texas History. And in that website, you will find all the JFK documents that the Dallas Police Department had and kept hidden or classified for 50 years. And in there, you will find Tippett's psychological assessment, which basically says he wasn't all there. And you will find a letter to the FBI asking them to go easy on Jack Ruby, because Jack Ruby is working as an informant for Congressman Richard M. Nixon. And the letter is dated 1947. Okay. So Jack Ruby was working for Nixon since 1947 as an informant, as Nixon was involved with, ostensibly with all organized crime investigations. They were really, dreading the mafia because it was really climbing and rising. So Nixon, as a congressman, made his reputation in that and in exposing communists like Whittaker Chambers was his witness for Alger Hiss.
Yes, Alger Hiss, right.
The State Department. So after that, Nixon did become vice president of the United States under Eisenhower, during which time the Cuban Revolution was happening. And during that time, although we ostensibly, the U.S., supported Batista, the mafia was happy with Batista because he was totally corrupt and in their pocket. The Castro Revolution started up, and so, as usual, the U.S. plays both ends against the middle, and they allowed supplying of Castro with arms. Okay, not knowing yet that Castro was a communist, and Castro changed communist in 1959. So during this time, he was kind of a Democrat, right? Freedom fighter. And the person dealing guns, delivering guns to Cuba was Jack Ruby, who was working for Richard Nixon.
Okay.
Okay, you see, starting to get the picture?
Yeah.
During this time, the CIA and the NSA organized a special operations committee that starts off named after its date. First one was called October 5th Committee. The second one was called the October 20th Committee. And then its third, molting, it became the 5412 Committee, the secret team that Colonel Fletcher Prouty spoke about in the 1990s. And so this 5412 Committee was basically the Executive Action Committee, and executive in the terms of execute. right, enemies of the United States, were eliminated through cutouts that were sent by this committee. And in order to give the president, Eisenhower, plausible deniability, and in case, anything happened, they say, I don't know anything about this, and he'd be saying the truth. So it was determined that the Vice President of the United States should be the chairman of the 5412 Committee, assassination apparatus of the CIA, the NSA, and at which committee also sat the FBI, the Attorney General, representatives from the Pentagon, the military, and they determined who had to be knocked off. They knocked off President of Guatemala. Then they knocked off, what was his name, Mossadegh in Iraq. They deposed him.
Right.
And on and on. I mean, it really has continued throughout. So the irony is this. Jack Ruby's dealing guns to Castro throughout this period and working, hand in glove with Richard Nixon, who's head of the Assassination Committee. Then some smart guy at the CIA, after Castro turns communist, I'm actually reading to you, reciting to you what I've read from. See, my talks are like books, and I put the footnotes in my footnotes. Everything I'm going to tell you right now comes from Richard Bissell, Richard Helms, and Victor Marchetti, three CIA. Richard Helms was director of operations, I believe. Richard Bissell was a big wig, and in the 60s at the Bay of Pigs time, and Marchetti. So their three biographies, they've published them. And from that, I can tell you this. In the late 1950s, when Castro turned into a problem, some smart guy at the CIA said, wouldn't it be great if the mafia just knocked that guy off? He says, yeah, that would be so neat, the mafia. And they really do have a grudge against him, so the people would really believe it, It would really be easy to imagine that. So, yeah, it's a good idea. And then somebody said, well, that's such a good idea. Why don't we do it? Well, how do we go about that? Well, we don't know anybody here in the mafia, do we? Oh, yeah, we know somebody. In Las Vegas, Robert Mayhew, he works for Howard Hughes. He runs the whole show, and he knows all the mobsters there. We'll tell him. Let's see if he can find us somebody. So Mayhew gets the word, and he contacts Johnny Roselli. And he says, Johnny Roselli, you're a very patriotic American. The government needs a little help. And so let's see if we can make a deal. Can you arrange for some of your boys to kill Castro? And he said, well, for my country? Yeah, sure. So Roselli got the word, and he said, yeah, this is a great opportunity. We'll be working for the government. And, of course, they got to cut us some slack. Maybe this is a good deal. He contacts his main contact was Sam Giancana, Chicago. So Giancana says to him, that's a good idea. Nobody here likes Castro. He booted us out of Cuba, but I can't do this job because that area is the domain of Santos Trafficante. He's the Don in Florida, and he governs things that deal with Cuba too. But I'll try to make a deal. I know Carlos Marcello, and I know him, so let's try to make a deal. So on September 25th of 1959, a representative of the National Security Agency and the CIA named Sheffield Edwards, whose name appears in that famous Bush memo.
Right. Later
on, debriefing the anti-Castro Cubans after the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
Sheffield Edwards is also mentioned in Philip Corso's The Day After Roswell as the number 3 man in UFOs at the CIA. So Sheffield Edwards meets Johnny Roselli, Santos Trafficante, and Giancana. And they go and they have a meeting, and $10,000 was given to them to start the operation. So Santos Trafficante took $10,000 from the CIA and got the operation to kill Castro going. Interestingly enough, if you read Seth Kantor's The Ruby Files, or Who Was Jack Ruby, they're various, same book, a couple of different titles, but the man's name is Seth Kantor. he says that Jack Ruby made a trip to Cuba in late September of 1959. So what do we have here? We have the 5412 committee plan. We have $10,000 going to Santos Trafficani to get the deal going. Then we have Ruby, who works for Nixon, goes down to Miami, goes down to Cuba, and then comes back. Okay? So this is the nexus of this whole operation. So it's going really well. You know, they were trying to kill Castro. They tried really weird things like putting LSD in his cigars and putting radiation in a studio where he was going to be for 3 hours, and then shooting him from a high building, which high in Havana is 5 stories, you know?
Yeah.
From a tall building, they were going to shoot Castro while he spoke in this plaza. And as you know, he was renowned for his 3.5-hour orations. Plenty of time. But the plot was foiled when one of the mafia operators was actually a member of the Cuban secret police. And they stopped the guy with the telescopic rifle just in the nick of time, and Castro lived. So Castro did issue, after you had these 3 things, he issued a threat. He said, look, you know, if you're going to play this game, you got to be ready for it from both sides. But that did not mean that he was really crazy enough to go and kill John F. Kennedy. We jump now to 1963, after the missile crisis, and we have this thing called Operation Northwoods, which was a plan to invade Cuba in December, near Christmas, intentionally, near Christmas, to invade Cuba after conducting a false flag operation, a bombing in Miami that would kill a lot of people and would be blamed or pinned on Castro, right? Giving casus belli, cause for war or invasion. And Kennedy said, no, you know, we almost went to nuclear war last year, and I promised Khrushchev that I would not invade. And I don't intend to invade. We're not going to do that. And we're not going to certainly conduct a terrorist attack on our own people, for this reason. So what I believe happened is that at that point, that critical point, Kennedy had unrolled a program that was moving so fast that he was deconstructing actually the whole national security apparatus, because it had almost caused nuclear war.
Yep.
He blamed the Bay of Pigs operations, the black operations of the CIA, Allen Dulles, and the botched up operation at the Bay of Pigs as the reason for almost bringing us to nuclear war over the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. So his intention in 1963 was to take away all power from the CIA, to dismantle it. And he started by notifying the Pentagon that they were his primary source of intelligence, that they were to supply him with the primary source on their own initiative without him asking or if he asked, and that this was his decree. And what that meant was he was making the Pentagon the intelligence agency of the United States government, because he no longer trusted the CIA or its personnel. How could he trust Allen Dulles? When his father, I think we talked about this, his father had prosecuted Allen Dulles and his brother under the Trading with the Enemies Act back in 1940, and they were involved with Prescott Bush.
Right. Well, plus Jack Kennedy, I had read, thought that Allen Dulles was a madman, that he was just...
megalomaniac.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the word. He's a madman. He was... I had a very interesting experience with a friend on Facebook. He actually contacted me and told me that he had Joseph P. Kennedy's memoirs, which were published privately. And in the memoirs, which was intended primarily for the Kennedy family and close associates, it said that Joe Kennedy tried to warn Eisenhower to get rid of the Dulleses, not to let them near his intelligence or his State Department. He said, these guys are bad news. I prosecuted them. They're Nazi sympathizers. as a matter of fact, he said that Allen Dulles had delayed the Allied movement into Austria and Eastern Germany by planting false information that slowed our armies down. He claimed that General Wolfe was in a certain section of Germany while Wolfe was escaping with his troops in another direction, but they had to slow down their advance and go in that direction because Dulles had told, he warned them. He said, look, if you allow these people into your intelligence, into the Central Intelligence Directorate, they're going to conduct black operations behind your back. They're going to compromise you. And then when they've conducted the operation, they're going to force you to go along with it. Because if you don't, you will be embarrassed and humiliated publicly. That's the kind of people that these are. And Eisenhower thought about it, and Eisenhower relented. He had a lot of pressure. So he appointed Allen Dulles, director of the CIA, and John Foster Dulles, director of the State Department. Yeah. And there was a sister, third element, Eleanor, and she moved around. Google or Wikipedia, Eleanor Dulles, and you'll see her rise through the ranks in the financial realm, the Office of Budget and Management, the relief to Berlin, all the money that was going to Germany. As a matter of fact, when she retired, they had a citywide farewell for her. And they call her the Mother of Berlin. So these three siblings were really nefarious influences in making policy. You see, they were making policy, and they got away with it with Eisenhower, but drove him right to the wall, to the point where he warned the nation about the military-industrial complex.
Yep. On
his last night in office. And fellas, I saw that. I was sitting in front of a black and white television set, and I saw that the first time, and my brain was going, man, what is he saying? Who's he talking about? I got that it was really, really grave and serious. His demeanor, it was not happy leaving office.
And then Kennedy made his speech, of course, about the shadow government a few years later.
Right. Now, I think we talked about UFOs in this context, and there's a very good book about it. You know about the burnt memo?
No.
Okay. Among the MJ-12 documents that Dr. Robert Wood and Ryan Wood have uncovered is a 10-page document that's called the Byrne Memo, because purportedly it was a carbon copy of the operation to knock off President Kennedy. A CIA in code, a very abstruse language, block paragraphs, and it has burn marks at the corners and edges. And the story is that the CIA agents were told to burn all these papers that were pertaining to the JFK assassination. And somebody threw that one in the fire, and some CIA agent said, I'm saving this one. He pulled it out, and it was damaged and singed, but he saved it and he leaked it, and it got to Dr. Robert Wood. Now, this mentions UFOs, and it mentions how to deflect Lancer's questions. It says Lancer's been asking questions about UFOs, and basically you can't tell him anything, and you've got to use different ways, tactics, deflect the question, ask for clarification of his question, tell him you're going to give him the information, don't tell him anything. But in the midst of that, as I'm reading this, I know his code name. Lancer was JFK's Secret Service code name and national security code name. And Lace was Jackie's code name for the Secret Service. They were protecting Lace and Lancer. And so I am reading this document, and then I come to a very sinister paragraph that deals with, the difficulty of dealing with Lancer, and, that this may require action by the 5412. And I looked at that, and I knew what 5412 meant.
Wow.
I have the UFO issue is critical, and this whole thing is about stopping him. And, they know what he wants to do. He wants to know all about it, and he wants a briefing, and he wants a reclassification, and he's going to divulge it to the American people. And they've got to stop him. So they start talking in these very coded terms, and they talk about if the precipitation is wet in Washington, if the precipitation becomes wet in Washington. And I know the code word for Russian killings, Russian KGB, and they call it wet works. So all of a sudden, they're getting all these pieces, from the intelligence realm and from the UFO realm, and the whole thing comes together in that phrase, may require 5412 action. And that means we're going to have to kill him, precipitation.
That's unbelievable.
Well, it's true. And so I got the document, and then I had, as I was involved in the UN Disclosure Initiative in 2008 through 2010, as one of the contacts, pushing here in New York. I'm in New York. I know a lot of people, so I was, getting the thing going toward a UN hearing on UFOs. And in the midst of that, I had a long conversation with Michael Salla, and I revealed to him all of these coded words. And Michael Salla has written a very good book called Kennedy's Last Stand, dealing with this issue. And the only mistake that I think he makes is that he believes that the person that wrote the memo, the Byrne memo, was Allen Dulles. But this is about 1963. So unless Allen Dulles continued secretly as the director of the CIA, using McCone as his front man, but him really running the show, then I don't believe he could have written the memo. And I thought that it was probably somebody like James Jesus Angleton,
Okay.
the chief spook, chief of counterintelligence. Now, counterintelligence in the CIA is a very important term, because it doesn't mean just counterintelligence via Russia and North Korea. It means counter alien intelligence too. So that's why CIC handles UFOs. They are an intelligence operation that was intruding into U.S. airspace and had to be dealt with. And that's why crashed UFOs are classified as foreign technology.
Okay.
The Air Force?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Office of Foreign Technology. Oh, yeah, they're the ones that recovered crashed East German jets and, bought mind control machines through surrogates from North Korea. Microwave mind control machines.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's all this has been going on. And some people believe, actually, that President Kennedy had two speeches for the trademark. He had the officially stamped speech that he purportedly was going to give, but then he had this other secret chapter or paragraph or phrases where he was going to reveal the existence of UFOs. And
interesting.
And he is mentioned, if you go into the MJ12 documents, there is one called the IPU report, the Interplanetary Phenomenon Unit. That was the crash retrieval team. And in I believe it's point 11 of this report, it says, and now this report came out July 25th, I believe is the time of this report. They went down, July 4th to 5th was the crash, and they found out about it around the 8th. Then they went and cleaned up the area. So by July 20th, 25th, this report was being delivered to the Pentagon. And I think point 11 was, we have discovered that Congressman John F. Kennedy, Democrat of Massachusetts, son of Joseph P. Kennedy, member of the Committee to Reorganize the Government, has learned of these affairs through a contact in through a staff member of the Secretary of the Air Force. And basically it says that he should be watched because he's learned super secret classified information, and that, he basically is a security risk is what it's stating.
Amazing. It's amazing, Robert, because as you're explaining all this, there are still so many people that do not understand that there's a secret shadow government
Yeah.
that operates. I mean, they still think that the guy that sits in the White House, the buck stops there. And it's just, as you're laying all this out, it's becoming clearer and clearer
Yeah.
that the guy in the White House is nothing more than a puppet.
Indeed.
Well, also at the time in the early 60s, they were seeing a lot of UFO activity over the Soviet Union. And from the research I've done, JFK was very concerned that they might misconstrue that as our stuff, our hardware.
Right.
And it would be raising tension. So he wanted to basically also try to get it out of the hands of NASA, because he saw NASA for what they were, which is basically a cover for the intelligence community, really, and private companies. And that's the stuff I read about that memo, was he was really concerned that the Soviet Union would think it was ours.
Yes. And the other part was the UFOs seemed to be conducting a very mischievous, incitatory, inflammatory operation, in that they would zoom in from the North Pole and come down over Canada, streaking down through the United States or going to Russia. And both our air defenses would confuse them, the UFOs, for something from the U.S. or the USSR.
Right.
And it's as if one faction of aliens was trying to trip a nuclear war, while another faction of aliens was saying, don't you dare. Look what we can do. Minot Air Force Base, 1967, they came over missile silos, and in 10 missile silos, they knocked out all the computers. They retargeted the missiles. I mean, if that isn't a warning, it's the best warning of all time, which is, look what we can do. We can fly over your missile base, and we can change the target on your missile. So if you think you're going to do a sneak attack on Russia, don't be surprised if your missile lands in Washington. You know, because what you give is what you get. So there's these warnings. The other one was the famous launch from Vandenberg Air Force Base, also in the mid-'60s, that was being tracked by radar motor cameras. And they saw the missile streaking up and going at 5,000 miles an hour. And as the missile's traveling 5,000 miles an hour, they saw a UFO go around it.
Yeah.
Imagine that maneuver. It goes, the missile's going linearly this way, and they see a UFO striking it. Then the UFO goes around it. Then the UFO came to one side like this, and still moving with it, flashed a light at it, and then it went to the other side and flashed a light at it, hitting it on the tip of the cone, and then the thing just exploded. Yeah, blew apart.
Yeah, I saw the interview with I think the original cameraman. I don't think they showed the footage, but this is going back 10 years ago. Late 90s or something like that.
Remember Mandelsman was.
Yeah, and he was the actual cameraman who filmed that shot, and he talked about it.
Yeah, so what we're doing ourselves is dismantling the deception. And, you know, some people feel powerless, you know, they say, oh, you know, what's the use? But every time we get together, every time we disseminate facts, you know, share information, you know, people's eyes start to waken up. And, you know, I'm exceedingly happy that I have lived to discover those frames. You know, when I heard Lyndon Johnson in 1964 say that he was closing the files for 75 years, I was mind-boggled. 75 years, that's 2039. But I vowed at that moment that I would live till 2039 to learn the truth about the JFK assassination.
That's because old Lyndon was at the top of the pyramid.
Absolutely. He was one of the great beneficiaries. You know, all of them were beneficiaries. When you know the score that Kennedy was going to dismantle the CIA in his second term, that the U.S. Department of Defense, which is basically the Defense Intelligence Agency that we have today, that was going to replace the CIA, that he was going to split the CIA separately into another thing that would be doing only intelligence, and operations were going to be handled by the military. Now, I had a real eye-opening experience last week. I listened to Colonel Fletcher Prouty in the YouTubes that he's left, and there's one called The Bay of Pigs. And if you start with the Bay of Pigs one, it goes right into Vietnam. And what he says is very telling. He said that both the Bay of Pigs and Vietnam were black covert operations conducted by the CIA. Vietnam was not a war. The Vietnam operation was a CIA secret operation. We never declared war. Right?
Yeah.
So, but he said the reason the military, I won't say failed, I think it was a stalemate, but the reason that we didn't win was that it was not conducted as a U.S. military operation. He said that every soldier in Vietnam was ultimately under the control of the CIA case officer. The military were taking their orders from the CIA, and the military was not running the war to win it. It was running the war to please the CIA's program of how they were going to conduct this black operation. And that was a really eye-opening experience to realize that, wow, this is it. And that's the reason, again, for the killing of Robert Kennedy in 1968. Do you know, I had a really strange experience last night. And it was last night, but it wasn't here at home. It was a New York taxi cab. I was riding a New York taxi cab home from a UFO meeting, a group that meets here every month. And as I'm sitting there, they have these panels, LCD TV panels, and give you ABC news or shows. And out of the blue, it's Jeopardy. And it says, the question was, what president did the CIA try to assassinate 2 times because he wanted to withdraw from Vietnam? And I looked at it and I said, JFK. And the answer they said was Richard Milhous Nixon.
Nixon.
I am mind-boggled. I think we have to talk to Jeopardy and find out where they got that. But
I think that's CIA disinformation.
It may not be beyond if he woke up. When he after his first term, he woke up with no money in the bank, nothing going, no prospect of winning. Maybe he did have some ideas of terminating. He did. He actually did start the Paris peace talks. And then I see Richard Milhous Nixon appear on the screen. I have to talk to some producer at Jeopardy about where did you get that?
Yeah, maybe one of the question writers were trying to drop a bomb.
Perhaps, but it's not far-fetched that every president since President Kennedy has lived under the gun from the CIA.
Oh, yeah.
So the Reagan assassination attempt,
yeah,
everybody reads that as another one of these, a foiled black operation, the connections of Hinckley to the Bush family.
Yes.
The wacky story, about his mindset, his almost twin-like similarity to Mark Chapman, who killed John Lennon.
Yeah.
Put their pictures next to each other and then put their histories next to each other, and they're really very interesting. They both worked at hospitals that were near military bases, and then the Hinckley connection to the Bush family. The family connection to the Bush family is just beyond.
Yeah, and that was never picked up. I mean, I think it came out at one point and it was buried immediately.
Well, we live under a censorship. The only real straight reporting that we get today, unfiltered reporting, is on the internet. Reporters like you, like me, we go out and we have our hearing, thank God.
Yeah, exactly.
And again, I talk to people and they say, "Oh, it's hopeless. Why? What can we do?" This was last night, as a matter of fact. I was on a radio station in Hawaii, and they said, "It's over. The Constitution doesn't exist." I said, "What are you talking about? As long as the Constitution lives in your heart and in your mind, and you live by the Constitution and adhere to it, as well as claim your inalienable rights."
Exactly.
The Constitution is alive. It's when we start thinking that way,
They're thinking in terms of, I need a piece of paper I need to hold on to that.
Mm-hmm.
But you're absolutely right, Robert. You don't need a piece of paper. It's in your heart and your mind. Are you free or not?
That's your choice.
Exactly. Exactly.
Be so or not. And so I have great hope. I think for me to find the missing frames of the Zapruder film, or them be given to me, I didn't find them. They were given to me. To me, that's an act of God. And for it to happen on November 22nd, 2013, near the midnight hour. But that night, I kept a vigil, and I was keeping track, 6:35, the first casket. 6:35, the first casket got to Bethesda, the metal shipping casket. Oh, yeah. 6:45, Jackie was in the ambulance in the front with the second casket. Oh, the pre-autopsy investigation between 6:35 and 8 o'clock. Oh, 8 o'clock, and it was going like that, and heading toward midnight. Oh, my God, what a dreadful night, what a dreadful vigil. Am I going to stay up? As I said earlier, am I going to stay up and get some sleep and try to wake up? I'll be groggy if I get up at 3. And, I'll stay here. I'll keep the vigil. And, bing, what is that? And that happens, And then I'm looking, I'm in shock. So I didn't mention it,
Yeah.
George Noory. And I talked about this in 5412. And here, well, let's continue this saga, this discovery. So let's go back to the 1960 election, right? The Bay of Pigs thing and, getting rid of Castro is well in the works in many operations. The guerrilla operations that were happening, patrol boats that were being loosed in the Caribbean to attack Castro's sugar fields and, docks and anything they could do to harass him. Kennedy's running for president. Nixon expects to win. Kennedy steals the election. John Connor steals the election. The mob boss of Chicago stole the election for John F. Kennedy with an understanding on his part that, we're doing this for Joe and his sons are going to take care of us. The same as Johnny Roselli's mindset. If we do this for the government,
Right.
So here's the big surprise and the great irony. Nixon expects to win. Nixon's the chairman of the 5412 committee, the assassination apparatus. And he loses. And they know that Kennedy stole the election. So this has a huge grudge. Lyndon Johnson, ironically, as vice president, inherits the chairmanship of the 5412 committee without the knowledge of President Kennedy, being in the loop, except that he had to be in the loop because the Attorney General had a seat at the committee, right? But Robert Kennedy, it is said, went along with the Kill Castro operation, but may have kept Jack in the dark about it. That's hard to believe.
That is hard to believe.
It's hard to believe, but that's the way it was going. Another interesting thing I discovered from Fletcher Prouty's dissertation on the Bay of Pigs was that the operation seemed to have been sabotaged intentionally by somebody, or unwittingly, but intentionally. Unwittingly or wittingly, but intentionally. The call for the airstrikes that were supposed to support the Bay of Pigs landing called for airstrike to come from these planes that they had in Nicaragua. McGeorge Bundy, counsel to the president, made a call at 9 o'clock that night, the night that the operation was going to happen, and he called off those airstrikes without telling Kennedy, without telling anybody else. And that was, as a result of that, that's where the failure of the Operation Zapata came. And it was a whole, just like we have Senate investigations of things that went wrong. Well, the CIA and the State Department and JFK's executive department ran an investigation, and ultimately they went down the list of all the things that were happening. And Kennedy here's the deal. Strategically, the military knows what it's doing. You have to know if you're going to make a landing, you can't have aircraft coming down and striking at you. So the plan was to destroy Castro's Air Force in toto the day before and the days before the invasion. So they made this mass strike, and they attacked, and they destroyed almost all his planes except 3 jet fighters who, by chance and circumstance, the pilots had gotten in the jet fighters and flown to this other part of Cuba, I believe, to watch a soccer match. And that got them out of the area that was attacked.
Wow.
And they were still around. They were still unaccounted for. And Kennedy said, we have to destroy those 3 jet fighters before we invade Cuba. We're not going to get American aircraft involved in this, but you have to destroy those 3 jet fighters. So they were not destroyed, and the air support that was supposed to be given the Bay of Pigs landers was denied them on the whim of Bundy. So go to Fletcher Prouty, The Bay of Pigs YouTube, and stick with it.
Okay.
You will learn so much. This is one of the greatest military officers that our country ever had. And he reveals volumes. He shows you the documents. He tells you where to get the papers. He tells the whole story. It was one big thing, you know?
Yeah.
Bay of Pigs to Vietnam. And then in Vietnam, what were we doing? We had the assassination of Diem.
Right.
You know, and his President Diem and his brother, Madame New. Remember her?
Yeah.
Okay. Some people thought that she got involved in the killing of President Kennedy too, in revenge for having her husband and her brother assassinated.
So, Robert, if we take a look at the Kennedy assassination as a whole, we're talking about government involvement, we're talking about CIA involvement, we're talking about mob involvement, mafia involvement.
Industry. The oil industry was very big in this operation. As far as financiers, H.L. Hunt, Clint Murchison, Sid Richardson, they really had an axe to grind with President Kennedy. The steel industry had an axe to grind with President Kennedy.
And didn't the mob, didn't they despise Robert Kennedy because he was going after the mob?
Absolutely. That was the main reason they wanted to get rid of the Kennedy administration, was because of the bulldog attack that Robert Kennedy was conducting on the mafia.
Okay.
You know, about a month before, I remember seeing this a couple of times. I came home from school and they were having these hearings on TV, and I had no foggy notion what it was about. And I turned it on and I started watching this old Italian guy named Joe Valachi start talking about something called the Cosa Nostra. And then I started to get the hang of it, and I saw a few hearings, and who is this old guy? He's talking about gangsters. You know, I was around when Albert Anastasia was knocked off in the barber shop in 1957. And that was a huge killing, you know.
Yeah.
He was the chief mobster around here, and he was having a haircut and a shave, and while he was in this thing, they came in. They had Daily News, had pictures all over the place. So these things were happening, and you know the term the invisible government?
Yes.
Okay. Let me tell you where I found that phrase for the very first time. I came across I think November, late year editorial in the New York Times, and it said the invisible government. And I start reading it expecting what you're expecting. But what I read was the New York Times was exposing that there was something they called the invisible government, another organization that was organized crime, that had its empire, had its domain, had its officers, had its administration, had its tax system, and that the extortion that they were getting from business owners, forcing
right.
all that kind of thing, that was a second invisible government that the American citizen, the American businessman in particular, had to live under these two really terrible oppressions, you know, the regular system,
Right.
And tax and business regulations, and then the mafia coming in on top of it and demanding extortion or putting people out of business and so on and so forth. So they named that the invisible government. So what do we have? That's 1958. Okay? 1 year later, the CIA makes the deal with the mafia to kill Castro. And so this marriage occurred. And that's why we have a gangster government today.
Okay.
Yeah.
How about Tony Accardo? Was he involved?
I don't know much about Tony Accardo. I've never gone into details. I've only heard his name peripherally.
Okay.
And if you would enlighten me, I'd be appreciative.
Was he the mob leader out of Chicago?
That would be later. That would be, I think so, but I can't be sure.
Okay.
But if it was, it would have been much later than the time that we're speaking of.
Okay.
The time of Sam Giancana, who came to a very grisly end, by the way.
I was just going to say, right. Yeah.
Well, you know, a lot of people feel a great dissatisfaction that justice wasn't done and, you know, the killers got away with it. But when you really look, you know, time time does bring justice, and the saying, the postman always rings twice. And so many of the people that were involved in the Kennedy assassination met gruesome ends 10 years later. When the House Select Committee started calling witnesses in their investigation, people like George de Mohrenschildt ate a shotgun in his friend's house. He was living in Miami, and coincidentally, around that time, George de Mohrenschildt wrote a personal handwritten letter to George Bush, director of the CIA, asking his help in getting the FBI off his back. Then he's called and subpoenaed to appear, and he dies, and, suicided.
Right.
And I heard that, a story I've heard is that there was a tape recorder running in the house when this happened, and supposedly de Mohrenschildt was alone in the house, and the tape recorder picked up a set of footsteps going in, and then the shotgun blast. And that's how George de Mohrenschildt goes back so long with the Kennedy family, it is mind-boggling. About 10 years ago, Geraldo Rivera came out with a story where he revealed that George de Mohrenschildt courted Jackie Kennedy's mother after Jackie Kennedy's father died.
Wow, okay.
George de Mohrenschildt wanted to marry Jackie Kennedy's mother.
Okay.
He was a big Russian social climber, and she refused him. And just coincidentally, this George de Mohrenschildt gets Lee Harvey Oswald the job in the Texas School Book Depository.
Robert, on the Zapruder film, just for a second here. Now, you're saying that you actually have seen the entire Zapruder film intact.
No. I'm saying I'm missing frames. Even the film that I have found with these missing frames, I believe has been frame reduced.
Okay.
It looks more natural. But if you'll recall, we had the conversation on the Zapruder film last year, and I said that when Zapruder testified, I remember bringing the camera and...
Right.
Yeah. So Zapruder, when he testified before the Warren Commission, told them explicitly twice, maybe, and emphatically the third time, that he had shot the film at 24 frames per second. And I told you that knowing the camera, I understood instantly what he was saying. He shot the film in slow motion.
Yeah.
You see? So if the car went only 11.2 miles an hour, 11.8 at its fastest point as it came down the street, and that's Warren Commission statistics, then that car should be crawling down the street at 1/3 of 11 miles per hour. We should see a car just going 4 miles tops.
Right.
Coming down the street. But we don't see that. And so this one moves smoothly, but what I feel is that it's been reduced. If you reduce a certain 1/3 of the frames, right, then you might be getting to the real time of the event. So selectively, sections were chopped completely, like long strips, and then joined the one at the sign. Okay, Zapruder said that he would, and you know what? If you study the original Zapruder film, there are a lot of anomalies, and one of them is this: Zapruder is panning down as the car is moving, and it disappears behind the sign. But you see that he came out expecting a car, and it didn't come out, and then he went back. You can see that even though the film is cut, there's this little jump where he loses it and comes back and picks it up again. So what happened is that when the car went behind the sign, President Kennedy was shot in the back and in the throat. And when he did that, he stood up in the car, and it was seen by William and Gail Newman, and it was seen by Zapruder, who told the Warren Commission, I saw the president's head behind the sign. He said, no, it popped up behind his... you couldn't have seen him. He was blocked by the sign. And he said, no, I saw his head pop up behind the sign. And then he said, but that's not in the Zapruder film. It's not in your film. And he said, but I saw it. It's a really strange little exchange there. And he said, what speed did you take it at? He said, 24 frames per second. No, that's not correct. The FBI says you took it at 18 frames per second. He said, no, I took it at 24 frames per second. They never say or get into the subject that the camera could take 1 frame per second, 18 frames per second, or 24 frames per second slow motion. And that's what he's telling them. And then they realize, whoa, go here. And then they go on to another question. Then they ask him, they question him, they show him a picture. and he can't find himself in the picture where he was standing. There's another strange mystery.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Read it. It's the best thing you can do is go into the material.
Did the car stop?
Yes, the car stopped.
It stopped, right?
Stopped and swerved and stopped at the sign, and the two shots came, and he popped up, and then he fell in.
Okay.
And Mr. Newman, whom I've interviewed personally, I interviewed him in 1998. What was that? The 35th anniversary. The date, 35th anniversary in Dallas. I meet William Newman, whom I'd seen that night on CBS, saying that he saw the president stand up in the car, and it seemed to him like he was going along with a gag or something. And the gag that he thought the president was going along with was getting shot, because President Kennedy got shot low between the shoulder blades around the 8th thoracic vertebra. That's, halfway down your rib cage. And he went, "Oh my God, I've been shot."
Yeah.
He yelled it out, and the Secret Serviceman told that to the Warren Commission. And our inspector said, "Oh, he couldn't have said that. He was shot in the throat, and he couldn't have uttered a word." He said, "No, we heard him say, 'Oh my God, I've been shot.'" And he said, "No, he couldn't." He said, and then Kellerman and both say, "Yeah, we heard him say that." And then in a really snarky remark, he said, "How can you be so sure of that?" And he said, one of them said, "He said it with a Boston accent." Read it. It's in the Warren Commission report.
It's interesting. There's a guy on YouTube, Al, you remember this because I think you actually found the clip where he did some film analysis, and he he filled in the missing parts of the film.
Mm-hmm.
And when he did that, it showed the car. Now, I don't know if he showed it stopping completely, but he showed the car slowing down considerably so that the shot can be taken.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with the Zapruder film that everybody is familiar with, the car doesn't slow down. It basically, and it speeds up.
Yeah, and that's the optical illusion, and that's what he constructed. In 1992, I discovered splice marks and inserted frames and buildings that moved 30 feet and trees that jumped, and the relative motion fooled the human eye into believing, A, that the car didn't stop, and B, that it accelerated and didn't stop the second time. It stopped twice. Senator Ralph Yarborough, who was in the third car back, he said the cavalcade came to two stops. One was a near stop and one a complete stop.
Mm.
And only after the third shot did the cavalcade really get going. And one of the proofs of the complete stop at the grassy knoll is in photo analysis of frames. If you're moving with a car, tracking a car smoothly, you will see the car clearly in your film, but the background will be blurred. If you stop and for a moment hesitate, the car will blur and the background will be clear. At this grassy knoll, there are several frames where both the people in the background are clear and the people in the car are clear. And some of the frames that have been removed are to make it look like the president was shot and thrown forward. But what it really was is the guy hit the brake really hard.
Mm-hmm.
All the bodies went forward. You see him, Jackie, Connolly, everybody, and even the passenger. They all lurch forward exactly as it happens, according to the laws of physics, when you're arrested from speed to zip to zero. So all of these are illusions in the Zapruder film, and I'm happy to say that you are the first persons, friends, people that I've shared those pictures with.
I appreciate it. They're great pictures.
They are pictures, they are scenes of love, of affection, of care, concern, and courage that Americans have never been allowed to see.
Well, it's a completely different depiction of what happened.
I set it up. They're not all the frames. They're selected frames, selected missing frames, but each of them a frame that you have never seen.
Yeah, I'm looking at them now. Yeah.
Now look at the second one. After the first headshot, look at the second. You see that big splotch of red right in their faces.
Yep.
That's President Kennedy's brains pouring out down into the floor of the limousine. And by removing that spillage, it's called blood splatter analysis. There's only one way that brain could fall out, and that's the shots coming in from the front and the top, hitting the brain pan, the base of the brain, where the brain sits, and the jet shooting out forward. See?
Yep.
But that doesn't drive him back, the jet. The other thing, and you do see this in the regular Zapruder film at 313, when the bullet really slams down, it's like a hammer on his head, and his neck contracts. Everything crunches down from the impact, and you can tell from that where it came from. It came from the right and slightly above.
Yep.
And then, but those two that follow, the first one that I included has the streak. That's Z313, more or less. Then the second two is with the spillage of the brain tissue. I would say, nearly half the brain is gone in those two shots. Look at the volume. Look at the volume of that red blotch pouring out. I described it as a bucket of chum, on a fishing boat. I've been on boats, and you get that bucket, you throw it like that, That's what it reminded me of. It's graphic, it's gruesome, and
it's tough to look at.
And yes, I want to outrage the person. It's really, I'm telling you, it looked like what it looked like to me.
So, Robert, what you were saying before, and I think it's good for people to really get the big picture, is there was a multitude of reasons why he was assassinated.
Oh, yes.
Everything from his knowledge of extraterrestrials or, UFOs to the fact that he was aware that the shadow government has usurped the U.S. government. And you mentioned the mafia, and a lot of people don't realize that the original founder of the mafia, which is Giuseppe Mazzini, he was a 33-degree Mason, and he found the Scottish Rite in Italy.
Yeah.
The way I look at it, from stuff I've read,
he was also a communist.
The mafia, that's true, which ties back to the Bavarian Illuminati, who were really the founders of the basic concepts of communism, which Marx later on picked up and ran with it. A lot of people have to keep in mind that the mafia, to me, are kind of like the group of people where the boots hit the ground. I mean, they're tied with the Illuminati. I mean, right down the line. I mean, they're kind of like the Illuminati's
foot soldiers.
Yes.
Foot soldiers, exactly. Mm-hmm. I think Kennedy became aware of all this stuff. I mean, I know the Kennedy family is one of the Illuminati families.
Yes, they are. Yes.
So is Jackie's. Onassis is one of them. So I think what happened was he got in there, and this is just my own opinion at this point, but I think he decided he wasn't going to play ball.
Mm-hmm.
He was going to buck the system a little bit and start opening up his mouth and trying to change things. And they were like, well, no, that's not going to work, buddy. Yeah.
Well, you're right. And in the last month, I began to speak about this, but in the last month, he did so many things that were so radical and upsetting to the system. He had been conducting secret talks with Khrushchev through the hotline. 35
talking to him directly. Yep.
Yeah, directly.
It was
teletype. I think it was teletype, but that's direct enough. It's like you and I doing email these days,
Yeah.
And he had a conversation with him on November 12th, 1963, which was directly related to the UFO issue. And both of them said to each other, we're both under a lot of pressure, difficulties, in the government here. We have a lot of opposition. We have to be careful. Here, I'm going to tell you an amazing thing I just discovered about a month ago. I sat down, there's a guy named Dark Journalist on the YouTube. He has no name, Dark Journalist. He interviewed Richard Russell, who wrote The Man Who Knew Too Much, about Richard Case Nagel. And in the course of telling the story of Richard Case Nagel, who was being set up to be another possible patsy, he found out from the Russians. See, Richard Case Nagel was a double agent, a real one. He worked for the CIA. He made contact with the KGB, told the KGB he was, working for them, and he played both ends very, very well till he found himself in 1963 in Dallas, and he's told to follow Oswald, and that's his job. During this time, he's in contact with the CIA and with the KGB. And the KGB says to him, listen, we got a job for you. We got a really big problem. Somebody's going to try to kill your president. They're going to try to kill President Kennedy in Dallas, and they're going to pin it on this guy. We have found out the plan. They're going to pin it on Lee Oswald because he went to Russia, he was a defector, and he claimed to be a communist. But we're not involved in this. we're not out to kill President Kennedy, but we can't allow this to happen and be pinned on us. Do you know what's going to happen? We want you to kill Oswald. That's what they told Richard Case Nagel. So Nagel goes out, and he's in a quandary. Man, me kill this guy? You know what? Richard Russell finds out through Richard Case Nagel that there was an Oswald double. And the KGB was watching both of them. So this order comes down to Nagel from the KGB to kill Oswald, but he loses track of him and he doesn't kill him. But he also realizes, I'm being set up too. These guys are trying to set, they're going to have several patsies, right? And if it's not going to be this guy Oswald, they could be setting me up. So his solution to this was really cool. He saved his life, but he did 4 years in jail for it. He said, the only way that I can save my life is to get arrested and be in jail the day this happens. So he gets a gun and he goes into a bank, I think it was in Fort Worth, and he gives a note, to the teller, give me $100. And the teller looks at him like this, and he goes, starts 4 bullets into the ceiling, and the teller calls the cops, and he's waiting there, and the cops, and the cops taking him in, he said, you really weren't trying to rob this bank, were you? He says, just take me away, arrest me. And then he goes to court November 4th, and he tells part of this story, and nobody believes him. And then he was tried, and he did 4 years in jail. But the cop and everybody said, we don't believe you were really trying to rob this bank. It doesn't make any sense. And he said, well, I was there.
Yeah.
Take me away. But here's the most amazing part of the story. The KGB told him that there was the Oswald double, and there was Oswald, and they wanted him to kill Oswald to stop the plot, right? Richard Case Nagel did not kill Lee Harvey Oswald, and then he found out that somebody killed the double.
Interesting.
Now, what that says to me, friends, since nothing in the KGB could ever occur with that stovepipe, chain of command, Khrushchev tried to save Kennedy's life by ordering the KGB to kill the guy who was going to be the patsy in the hope of foiling the plot, or at least stopping it from being blamed on Russia. That is a story.
That is a story.
And I think it's a story that I'm going to write and put together, and it's Kennedy and Khrushchev, and he actually, because why would KGB do these things? And if you really know intelligence operations and the way the architecture of the command structure of the Soviets as compared to ours, then you understand that none of these things were going on without Khrushchev knowing about it. From the Bay of Pigs to the Cuban Missile Crisis to the Kennedy assassination. And I believe that Nikita Khrushchev actually tried to save President Kennedy's life by having Oswald killed, except they killed the wrong Oswald.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, Robert, we're talking about Oswald, and your view is that Oswald did not fire a shot. Is that correct?
Right. He was standing in the porch in the Texas School Book Depository. Okay. And the reason you can really make sure is if you look at that picture of the fellow in the corner, first landing, 3 steps up in the Texas School, the vestibule, looking out, you'll see his shirt. It has a unique pattern. It also has a missing button. Now, if you look at the arrest picture of Oswald, he's wearing that shirt, and it has the missing button.
Right.
Now, there's another couple of weird things that they did with that picture. They altered it. A friend of mine, Roy Schaefer, saw the original photo. The day it happened, it was sent out, and he worked in Dayton, Ohio, a newspaper there. And he got to see the original. And then he was to do the linotype or whatever they did in those days to get a picture in a newspaper. And then when he saw the paper the next day, it was changed. It wasn't the thing that he had done. And I have found that they cut out certain people in the foreground, well, the background to us, the car is here, but there are a whole score of people in front of the Texas School Book Depository. And there were certain mobsters standing there, according to Roy, recognizable Chicago mobsters. So they covered them up. And one of the cover-ups, this is outrageous, one of the cover-up pictures in there is a little old lady with glasses and a little nurse's hat. And that's Oswald's mother. They took Oswald's mother and they plugged her right in there.
They stuck her in there.
Look at it. You'll see. This is amazing. This is where we've been living in the land of the Wizard of Oz.
It's bizarro land.
Bizarro land, you know?
A lot of people forget there was a second investigation in 1976 by the House of Representatives, and they came to the conclusion that it was likely a conspiracy by the CIA and the mob.
Yeah, the Church Committee, 78. The Church Committee, and I have a copy of that. This is where I have the genealogy of the 5412 Committee. It's in that report. And when, you know, it's just a few sentences. He just makes reference to, you know, the October 5th Committee, the October 20 Committee, the 5412 Committee, and then it went into something called Operation 40. That's the last thing I know of the...
How many shooters were there, Robert? Your research.
My research says that there was a shooter on top of the county records building, which is where the sheriff's office is. There was a shooter in the Daltex building, which is probably the one that put the shot between the shoulder blades. There was the fake shooter who had no shot in the Texas School Book Depository that had to leave the rifle but hit nobody, except missed a shot, the one that hit the street.
Right.
And went down the street. Then there was somebody by the sign, which I believe is Jack Ruby, because I have found a person with a dog that I believe is Jack Ruby right there. He's wearing the fedora. He's a big porky guy with a big hook nose. It shines in the sunlight. And he's got a dog with him. And then, you know, years ago I found it. It's in the Bronson picture. And I said, look at this. There's a dog standing up on two legs, hind legs in this gutter. And the guy says, oh, no, that's Mr. Chisholm's son. And I went, are you kidding me? That's a dog. And he says, no, that's Chisholm's son. And I said, well, if that's Chisholm's son, he has 4 legs and a tail, man. And so I have these pictures from the Bronson. And then I have these pictures, where I believe I've got him in an enhancement of the Willis picture, the Willis slide number 5, which shows the Stemmons Freeway sign, the Dogman picture, cars going down the street. And then when I found this, and they call him Dogman. Remember there's this term Dogman?
Yep.
It's a distraction. They're trying to put the Dogman up on the porch because there was a Dogman. And this is how this distraction and magic occurs. There is a real thing that we'll call Dogman, a guy with a dog. So they named this shadow on the porch Dogman. So you go, you look over there, you miss what's over here. That's
right.
You know, the deception. So then I found a bunch of other photographs, you know, over the last year and a half after the assassination. I've been trying to get that scene by who was there by the sign. That part where the car is blocked off, but where he got the shot in the throat.
You think Ruby was one of the shooters?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Same way that he sprung out on Sunday to plug Oswald in the side, I believe he did the same thing at that critical moment when the car stopped, and that he did it like this. He had a camera, and he had a .22 caliber pistol, and he went, Polaroid camera. He borrowed a Polaroid camera. He said that he wanted to take a picture of something. One story was that he wanted to take a picture of a poster, wanted poster. And Jack Ruby is also the person who called Zapruder's office to tell Abraham Zapruder to get his camera and go down and take the movie of the president. You see, these were money-making operations, preconceived, you know, if they got away with it all, right? What
was Zapruder's relationship with Jack Ruby?
Oh, he knew Jack Ruby.
Okay.
This was a nest. You know, they all knew each other. The janitor that cleaned Zapruder's place also worked for Ruby, cleaning up the Carousel Club. Zapruder seems to have been involved to some degree in that he left his office to take the movie. The movie was sold, they said for $50,000? No. The first payment was for $50,000, followed by 4 more payments of $50,000. Right? That was the real deal. And the shots that I'm talking about, the Daltex building, They probably came from a third-floor office below Zapruder's fourth-floor showroom. He had an empty office, and it had only a telephone and a chair. And when they sealed off the building, they captured an Army intelligence guy and a mobster together. The Army intelligence fellow was James Powell, and the mobster was Eugene Braden, who was the adopted son of H.L. Hunt. He was a gangster, and he was also in the lobby of the hotel when Robert F. Kennedy was killed.
Okay.
And there's this thing about code, this code, the cross.
Yeah.
Cops had it on their patches here.
Yeah.
Right? In the arresting the tramps. And if you find a picture of Braden, the Braden picture in Dealey Plaza, it does exist, and he's wearing a fedora hat, but the headband has all these X's all around. So those were code symbols for the people that were involved to know each other.
Are you familiar with, how about James Files?
Yeah, James Files. Now,
he's in jail.
Files, he's in jail doing, if he's still alive, I think he might still be alive, regardless. His videotape.
He killed a cop, right?
I think he killed a cop.
Okay.
But regardless of what that crime was,
right,
his story has some elements, nuggets of truth in it. Now, my take on James Files is that he's a big blowhard, that he's a boaster and making himself bigger than he is, but that he was there. I don't believe he took the shot that he's talking about, that he shot, but I believe he knows what happened.
Okay.
And for me, the two important things about James Files' interview is that he says Jack Ruby was in Dealey Plaza. He was up there, up the street. Okay? So this corroborates my man with the dog scenario here.
Right.
And the other part that's intriguing is that when Joe West asks him about Officer Tippit, he says, turn off the camera. Turn off the camera right now. And that is very telling. So, James Files in 1963 may have looked quite a bit like Lee Harvey Oswald. And he could very well be one of the guys that killed Tippit. There were two people at the Tippit slaying. Mm-hmm. So that's a mystery. But for that reason, his description of how it went down, it's coherent with me, the positions of the shooters. And the fact that he said Jack Ruby was up the street, which up the street to him was if he's on the grassy knoll looking this way, what's up the street? The Stemmons Freeway sign.
Yeah.
Where I say I found Ruby. Now, the clincher for me is that last year, some October, maybe it was even before 2013. Regardless, I came across all these pictures are flooding the internet now. JFK assassination pictures, snapshots that you've never seen before, little black and white brownies. They're all over the place. So I'm going through all of them. And I see this picture that says John Wiegand photo, 15 to 20 seconds after the JFK assassination. Well, that's an interesting title. And the picture is black. The sign is there. The sidewalk's there. You can see everything is clouded over and really dark. And I said, wow, let me work on this picture. This looks, I've never seen anybody that had a picture 15 to 20 seconds after the assassination. What was going on? Everybody's running all over the place, right? So what do I expect to see? I expect to see people running. So I put the picture in my computer and I get my software, web image, very rudimentary. It's not Photoshop by any way, just contrast, gamma, etc. And I go gamma up, brightness up, contrast here, then bing, and what comes out is a man wrestling with a dog, trying to get it leashed. It's the dog's going. What would a dog do after all these explosions and everybody screaming, right?
Yep.
And the guy is standing in like a stance, like bent knees. And the body language of this man doing this thing with the dog, trying to get him under the leash or he's got him by the collar and trying to do something. It's the same posture of Jack Ruby lunging out with the gun on Sunday to me.
Okay.
You see?
Yeah.
So It's a proportional thing. It's the way he's dressed, the fedora hat. Guy has a dog. Everybody knows that Jack Ruby loved his dog like a wife. He wouldn't go anywhere with him. He even had sex with the dog. He's really loathsome, disgusting person. If you read Seth Cantor's book and you read about Jack Ruby, you're going to find out about this. He really would outrage people, doing
just a vile guy.
Yeah, doing sex tricks with the dog. And it's like, that's just her. She's like, she's my baby, And he wouldn't go anywhere with her. But the day he shot Oswald, he put her in the car and he left the locks off, right? So then he'd say, hey, I'm going in, but please take care of my dog. That's the relationship that Jack Ruby had with Sheba. That's why I say the things I say. And for everything I say, I got a picture here. This guy's got a dog. He's got a fedora. He's wearing a suit, kind of porky. And look at the way he's shaped, right? And then you look at the Willis 5 picture. Okay, look at Willis 5 slide and look under the Stemmons Freeway sign where there's a K. It says keep right. Right under the K, you see a man standing there. It's like this. He's porky, portly, fat, in a suit. He's got a pork pie hat. And the pork pie hat comes out with the brim, but you still see his nose in the sunlight. Jack Ruby.
Jack Ruby.
And then I enhanced the photograph. I've worked on this for years and years and years. And I enhanced the photograph, and I bring it up, and I see to his lower right, I see a patch of black and gray. And John Kennedy is actually, his head is cocked and looking down, and he's looking at Jack Ruby's dog in that Willis picture. Look at the Willis photo I'm talking about, and look at John Kennedy's head, and ask yourself, what is he looking at? And then when you compare the Bronson photo with Chisholm's son, who has 4 legs and a tail, you get the big picture. Then we get the Wiegand photo, 15 to 20 seconds afterwards, and we have the guy struggling to get the dog under control, and a few others. He's got the dog and the tail sticking out. Another very important point. Jack Ruby was seen in Dealey Plaza. Jack Ruby was observed from the second floor of the Texas School Book Depository by 3 seamstresses, women who worked on sewing machines. Their office was on the second floor. They were looking out. They saw Jack Ruby walk in front of the Texas School Book Depository and hand Oswald a gun.
Is that right?
Yes, that is right. They testify they saw Jack Ruby hand Oswald a gun. Oswald took the gun. The patsy was taking the gun that if it had been found and if they told the truth about the throat shot and all of that,
right,
could have linked him to the shot in the throat. And then that's the gun that failed as well. When they said he tried to fire in the movie theater, but the story is it either misfired or the policeman put his hand on it and the hammer came down on this part of between his thumb,
right,
but saved his life. That was Officer McDonald.
Now,
so I have a clear picture of this here.
Robert, when we talk about, as we mentioned before, the CIA, we have the mob, we have the government. So at the top, if I understand you correctly, that it was Lyndon Johnson at the top of this pyramid.
Well, there are 2 pyramids. There are 3 pyramids. There's the political pyramid of Lyndon Johnson having to stay out of jail, right? Because his impeachment was coming up. The vote was that afternoon. If he didn't become president by 12:30, 1 o'clock, at 2 o'clock, the Senate committee was going to say, we recommend the impeachment of Lyndon Johnson for gross corruption and bribery and, the whole laundry list of stuff. Okay, so there's that one pyramid, him and his cronies. Then there's the CIA. Now, in the CIA, if you listen to E. Howard Hunt, who confessed that he was involved in it on his deathbed to his son, St. John, if you listen to him, he says that it was Lyndon Johnson and Cord Meyer. Now, everything I've been talking to you about, the Zapruder film doctoring, the mass hallucination, the consciously engineered optical illusion, that's all mind control.
Yeah.
And who was in charge of MK Ultra? Cord Meyer.
Yeah.
So Cord Meyer is at the apex here along, because Dulles is supposedly not in the CIA, but after being the boss all those years, the loyalties, you can leave an organization, you still have the contact. So there's revenge they want. They hate Kennedy because the month before he went to the United Nations and said there should be nuclear disarmament on the part of Russia and pare down everything and turn over the nuclear arsenal to the United Nations. Jack, that was crazy.
Yeah.
What I have to say. And so that was outrageous. That's why Adlai Stevenson was beaten with signs and pelted with eggs. Yeah, that same month he went to visit Dallas. And he went back and said, don't go to Dallas. It's really dangerous. Look what they did to me. You know, I'm ambassador to the United Nations. It's really hostile. You shouldn't go. And Johnson said, oh, come on down here. You have to repair the rift in the party. You know, so Johnson lured him down there. Connolly was part of it, too. You know, Connolly knew something was coming down. He took a bullet, and he changed his story to fit the magic bullet theory. But they exerted a lot of mind control on Governor Connolly, too, because I saw him and Nellie Connolly on Larry King Live. If you go to their last appearance there, they say very interesting things. He says, no, I don't believe that anymore. You know, that's not true. I was not hit by the first shot. I was not hit. I heard the first shot. I turned around. He went on and on. Yeah. But then he says something very important. He says, and then the FBI took me and Nellie into a room, and they kept showing us the Zapruder film over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Well, until I just got tired of it. And, you know, and he admits he was confused.
That's the image they wanted him to.
They were programming him to believe that what he was seeing in the Zapruder film was more real than what he remembered as what he really happened to him.
Didn't Connolly also say that he did not believe the Warren Commission outcome?
He changed later, but in the beginning he told the party line. You know, he became a supporter of the single bullet theory, and you know he was a good old boy. The soul really does want to tell the truth. You know, the criminal does want to get caught. The criminal does want people to know that he did it. And Lyndon Johnson made some really, really arcane statements toward the end, you know, like the conversation, I believe, was late 68, maybe it was 1970. I think he was no longer president. But he talked to Walter Cronkite, and he turned to him, and he said, in the 1960s, we were conducting a murder incorporated in the Caribbean. And he didn't say, you know, they. He said, we. And now that you know that he was the chairman of the 5412 committee, you know who we was.
Yeah.
That's really, he, you know, he's kind of that serpent-tongued liar whose ego really does want people to know on one level. And then, of course, the other part of the ego says, I can't let them, but they slip up.
What do you think happened that he only did one term also?
Oh, what happened is that the people woke up one night and watched the Smothers Brothers. And as they watched the Smothers Brothers, they watched Pete Seeger sing right into the camera a song called Waist Deep in the Big Muddy, and the Big Fool Says to Push On. And I saw him. You see, the anti-war movement was percolating. It was like this little bitch here, a little bit there, a little bit here. But when Pete Seeger sang that song directly to Lyndon Johnson, because he stared at the camera through the whole thing, and when I looked at him, I said, my God, he's not singing to me. I know who he's singing to. He's singing this to Lyndon Johnson. And he has to be the bravest man I ever saw, you know? I said, this guy has to be the bravest man I've ever seen. And after that, singing of Waist Deep in the Big Muddy and the Big Fool Says to Push On, the anti-war movement coalesced, and then they got Eugene McCarthy to be their spokesperson. Then McCarthy went to New Hampshire, and he beat Lyndon Johnson in the New Hampshire primary.
Okay.
And that was the end of Lyndon Johnson. He came out, do not choose to run.
Yeah.
I regret that I didn't see that speech. I came home to find out that he wasn't running, but that was something.
It's very interesting. And then I guess John Lennon gave the same angst to Richard Nixon.
Oh, yes. He was giving the same angst to the CIA.
Yeah.
You know, the music, the power of music to move the multitudes was something that was really feared by governments. And it's music in all countries has a power over people to elevate, to motivate, to move, to outrage. And music of John Lennon was really moving the world toward a concept of world peace. And the song Imagine, more than any other one, I think.
It's interesting because you'll read books about the fact that the 1960s music scene was not organic, that it was actually orchestrated and manufactured and engineered by the CIA, but that they really couldn't control it. In other words, right. So it just basically didn't start organically, but then it just sprung out organically.
Yeah, the CIA and the Tavistock Institute.
Yeah.
I heard the same thing, Tavistock. I heard the same thing about the Beatles.
Yes.
That sound, those vibrations of the Beatles had been discovered by British intelligence, that they could really move people. Brian Epstein was the one who, he was the producer of the Beatles.
Yes. Yeah.
You know? So he was the big orchestrator, in a sense, conductor of the Beatles orchestra. And it's said, I've heard, that it was intentional, that these frequencies in the Beatles' music will stimulate that response,
Right.
His love and that elevation, that vibratory frequency that makes you feel good and happy and wholesome. And that was used, and it's been used to the opposite extreme, in rap music is the opposite extreme. That is so violent, and it's hypnotic. The rhythms are great, the beat is great, but then you hear what the background voice is embedding in the subconscious.
Well, it's the way they sing. It has a cadence to it.
Yeah, well, that's the hypnosis part.
Right, exactly.
And anybody listening to it, if you're not paying attention to the words, it'll sound, stimulating and exciting and, energizing, but on an adrenaline level, It's not the same as endorphins. I think the Beatles music produces endorphins in your head, which make you mood elevators and feel you happy and loving and kind. And then there are other musics that stimulate adrenaline and testosterone and will stimulate violence.
Yeah.
Especially if subliminally the words are talking about misogyny and treating women like hoes and, and kill a pig and all that stuff,
Exactly.
And I'm afraid that the black people in the country are the biggest victims of this, and that now Gary Webb is being resurrected.
Yes. There's a movie now coming out, right?
You may have seen a post that I put with his interviews. And that lays bare the CIA plan to addict the black population and to control them, with crack, the cocaine, the addiction, the gangs, the killings, and to just keep manipulating their psyches, kind of like turning on the heat or the oven and cooking and bringing up the flame and getting it all riled up and then bringing it down. And that they play them. They play the black population like an orchestra. And also the programming of the victim consciousness.
Yeah.
That we're victims all the time, and we're not responsible for our station, our situation. It was done to us, and that's belied by all the successful black people that Martin Luther King.
Right. Exactly.
And it's the language, it's the mastery of the language that will make you either a success or a failure in this country. And the black language has been mangled. And
yes.
they defend it in terms of, it's our language, it's Ebonic. But even the rap music and everything else seems to be degrading the humanity of African Americans. And there's a degradation in the language and dislogic in their arguments. They argue by analogy, often false analogy. They don't argue facts.
So I think music in general nowadays pushes decadence, violence, sex. I think across the board. I mean, I'm not saying every single band out there, but just with the images that they put out there with a lot of these pop stars that come out, because I know we put a lot of articles on the blog about this stuff, about the symbolism that they're using now openly, as far as ritualistic symbolism on stage and everything else, like the MTV Music Awards. But I think across the board, I think, like I said, the music is just pushing a lot of decadent behavior and violence and sex. And sex, I guess people can say that even going way back to Elvis, the way he would move his hips and everything else, and I'm sure there's been generations of people have said it about the last generation's music or the up-and-coming music, but nowadays, to me, it's over the top. I mean, now it's really blatant that they are doing a lot of ritualistic stuff on stage, even with the words, when you listen to the words.
Let's become a formula.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Seeing the formula
music,
repeated in every.
Yeah, I mean, it's always, I think, with certain pop music, there was a formula for a long time with certain bands, but I just think it's over the top right now. Because, I mean, I turn the radio on now, and
it's really unlistenable.
No, it isn't.
I don't listen to radio.
There's very little melody.
Mm-hmm.
It's extremely repetitive. Mm. And like I said, if you really listen to the words are just really, there was one song, I forgot what song that was. I'm not going to waste my time trying to remember it, but somebody crashing at the side of a bridge and I don't care, and something like that. And I was like, okay.
Knock yourself out.
Yeah, everything was do this, I don't care, do this, I don't care, do this, I don't care. And one of it was crashing at the side of a bridge, I don't care. I was like, okay, well, that's what they're trying to push, just do whatever you want, who cares,
Well, let me get back to a couple of points that I think are important to sum this thing up. The information is there. The truth has been told repeatedly. It's in a prismatic form. You have to really put it, get it into context. And the best way is Fletcher Prouty's Bay of Pigs on YouTube, and then followed up by the Vietnam War, how he goes through that. And you'll see that his story and the story I've come up with, really, they mesh together and they reveal the truth. Kennedy wanted to get rid of what he wanted: a recall device on all atomic bombers and missiles. He wanted to be able to stop a nuclear attack to the very last moment so that the fail-safe scenario could never happen. He ordered. Here's another interesting thing that was revealed by Fletcher Prouty. Kennedy ordered 1,000 troops to be removed from Vietnam, right, in National Security Memorandum 2072, I believe. And on Friday, the day of the assassination, that was rescinded by somebody in the State Department, signing as if it was coming from him. They said the president. Now, if it happened after the assassination, then that was the first document that Lyndon Johnson wrote. But if Johnson didn't have time to do that, in the time from the assassination till the autopsy, somebody else, put that document through while Kennedy was still alive, or during the afternoon of the assassination. That's a really big thing. And then we come back to Bundy and how he sabotaged the Bay of Pigs operation, and how conveniently they got the whole cabinet out of the country. The whole cabinet was in Hawaii on a jet when it happened, and they had to turn the jet around and come back. Yeah, the whole thing was really very well controlled. It was a military operation, no less secret and no less successful than D-Day was.
How about Kennedy issuing the Treasury notes?
The Fed, again, we have the litany.
Yeah.
His transgressions. He issued the silver certificates.
Yes.
He started printing money and taking that profit and that function away from the Federal Reserve. He was out to do the Federal Reserve in. He knew what it was, multi-Illuminati banking dynasty, controlling all the world's economies, exploiting people. And he was out to expose that. And I've heard, we've got at least, it's taken 50 years, but audit the Fed, passed the House. Now they're waiting to see which way the Senate goes. So we have some hope. They tell people, don't lose hope. As long as the Constitution's alive in you, and you stand up for your freedoms and your rights, and you act. Passive people don't get anything accomplished,
That's exactly right.
Can't do anything. But I point out that last year, and I'm always happy to point it out, last year for the first time, the people of a nation got together and stopped their government in its tracks from going to war. They stopped us from going into Syria because the British people stopped the British government from jumping into hell. And so that shows us our power. The internet has put this power at our disposal. So we're not, it's not hopeless, and we're not powerless.
How long do you think it's going to take, Robert? If you had a, I know this is a very difficult question to answer, but the subversion is so deep and it's so entrenched. How do you see the change evolving over a timeline? I tell people when they say to me, well, Mike, when do you think change is going to take place? I tell them, well, it's not going to be next week, and it might not even be in my lifetime. That a lot of us are here setting the tables, that the future generations really have to pick that baton up, and they have to continue the work. So what's your perspective on that?
Well, I really think that we've made the turn. As far as the awakening of the general public, I think we made the turn. I think that the delusions foisted on them by the Obama administration, they were really led like the Pied Piper.
Oh, yeah.
Remember what the Pied Piper did in the end? He led all the children off into a mountain that sealed itself, and Hamburg was left without children. Hamlin, not Hamburg. Hamlin was left without children.
Right.
And I see that the facade is off, and that we all do see and recognize that Obama is a pathological liar of the Marxist sort. But it's falling apart on all of them. When Leon Panetta comes out, that's patriotism. Leon Panetta came out and told the truth about what happened on that night, the Benghazi raid. Now, the Benghazi affair. Benghazi, they have to keep that suppressed because everyone knows that what Ambassador Stevens was doing in Benghazi was doing an arms deal and brokered by the United States, buying arms, American arms that we had given to the Libyan rebels, to give them to the Syrian rebels, which are now ISIS.
Right.
And that the ship was in Benghazi, the arms were loaded, the deal was finished, the ambassador had dinner with the ambassador from Turkey, the ambassador from Turkey left, the attack came in, and he was sacrificed.
Yeah.
So that we would never know about this arms deal. And now it's coming down, all those Humvees that ISIS is driving, and,
Well, they have T-shirts and DVDs also.
Bradley,
Facebook pages.
Yes, indeed. But again, I think that this is like a cutout. ISIS is a fake threat. I think it's BS. And honestly, I think it would be in our best interest to just let them do to each other what they want to do.
Yeah.
These people have been at war for 1,400 years. The Sunnis and the Shia. As soon as Muhammad died, the rift came between them. They hate each other, and there's never going to be peace between them because they're both so adamant and so radical in that their interpretation of the Quran is the right one. And there is a difference between the Shia and the Sunni Quran. The Shia claim that their Quran is the correct one, in perfect sequence, and 2 extra chapters in their Shia Quran. And that because of the murder of Ali, the need to cover up the murder of Ali, the Sunnis and the 3 preachers rearranged the chapters and took out 2 chapters from the Quran that were the ones that designated Ali as his heir and leader of the faith. It's a long story.
Yeah.
But the big story is that they all believe the same thing. The Masons are Islamic. How can you say that, Robert? Well, look at the 1948 film of President Truman at Soldier Field with the Shriners.
The Shriners, yeah.
And he's wearing a fez, and it says Islam, and it's got a star and a crescent.
Yeah, I was just, when you said that, you caught me for a second. Then I had to pause, and I thought about the Shriners, and the Shriners talk about Allah.
What are we talking about?
Yeah, okay. Interesting.
And how do they dress? The Shias?
Interesting.
White robes, hoods, blah, blah. And so it came to the Masons through the Templars, who got it from the Muslims when they were in the Holy Land for that 100 years after the First Crusade. There was that cross-pollination of information. So the Templars took the Islamic heresy that I've talked to you about, the idea that God unfolds creation by evil and destruction, and that other heresy, the one that the Shias are under, that the progenitor of this philosophy, Ash'al-Magani, said that he'd become Godhead, he attained Godhead by always following the opposite of the truth. And because the opposite of the truth had made him arrive at Godhead, the opposite of the truth is higher principle in this universe than truth. That's insane.
That is insane.
And that is what he wrote in a manuscript and forged the name of a Sufi saint and hid in a library. When they came and decapitated him and his followers, they found later, 100 years later, they found the manuscript and thought that it was the work of an antecedent saint. And that became the basis of Islamic law.
Okay.
And that's how that crazy Sharia law is so diabolical. I don't know the word for it. It is a product of Luciferism. And that's what they are all after. They all worship intelligence. But intelligence without love is a really evil force.
Yes. Yep.
Everything the Nazis did was perfectly intelligent, was perfectly logical. See, but when you divorce logic and intelligence from ethics and love, you are left with Lucifer. You're left with an anti-humanism. The same type of anti-humanism that I see in the report from Iron Mountain, where that report comes out and everything that we've seen over the last 60, 50 years, that came out in 67, I read it in 68, and I've been watching everything, the offshoring of our industry, the brush fire wars, the predictions of wars over water rights.
There was a script.
Yeah, the deindustrialization of the United States to industrialize the third world, thereby giving them labor and taking labor. And it talks about, well, if we, take this labor and offshore it, we're going to have all these people who are unemployed. We're going to have to deal with them, and so on and so forth. And this is the problem is they took a bunch of eggheads, as we used to call them in those days, and threw them in this place in Iron Mountain to work this out. And they're number crunchers. They're number crunchers. To them, we're not people. We're numbers and statistics. So that's what I mean by intelligence without love, where you're talking about population pruning. You're not realizing that, when you cull or prune a population or depopulate, human beings are dying and suffering and being eliminated. And then to them, it's just numbers.
Right.
And that's the same thing that happened with the Germans, when they're doing the Holocaust. They're just putting numbers on a page, but every number was a human being.
Yeah.
And that philosophy took over our government. And the Bushes had a lot to do with it.
Yeah, they have, and I hope people see it. And I do agree, more and more people are awakening. It's right there in front of us now. We can see what's unfolding.
Yeah. I sent you a BBC documentary which laid it out all on the line, and it's called 10 Conspiracies That Turned Out to Be True.
Okay. I'll watch that.
Yeah.
I'll put it up on the blog. Well, Robert, we're at 2 hours, and you have been so generous with your time as always. Is there anything else that you'd like to finish up with?
Yes. Happy news. The USA has UFOs. I think I'm going to send you the video that I found of Area 51 UFO flight test in 1989.
Okay.
3 of them are buzzing around Area 51, and
I saw that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's authentic. The buildings it is Area 51. That's why I verified this. Yeah. I said, anybody could say it's Area 51. Let's take a look at the runways. Let's look at the buildings. And God, that satellite dish, that's Area 51. That other satellite dish, that's those 2 runways. Oh my God, it's Area 51. Who could get access to Area 51 to hoax a video? But the coolest part is this. I had a nice chat with Scott Teeters. I broke the story on his show, Far Out Radio. And he calls me and he goes, those things look pretty small. I said, what? Come on, man. They're at least the size of a Humvee. No, I think they're small. I said, okay, look, I'm going to look at it again. I'm going to find ground references. So I started looking for trucks on the ground and cars and doorways and people. And I'm stopping the film every once in a while to get a reference, right? And all of a sudden I go, click, and I stop it, and I go, what? What I found in one frame of this, it's about 3 minutes, 24 seconds into it, if you have it. You stop it, and you see the 3 UFOs that are in the flight test going around, and you freeze it, and there on the ground were 8 more. Sets of 2. 2 here, 2 here, 2 here, 2 here. Like, oh, I got the whole fleet. Obviously, it's a flight test. That's what the film says. Gravity propulsion system flight test. February 7th, 1989. Coincidentally, February 7th is Flash Gordon's birthday. Buster Crabbe. This is kind of funny. It's kind of cool. But to see that picture and to find the fleet. And so what's happening is it was a flight test. They were going up 2 by 2. There's the lead man and 2, and they're, wow, they do their turn. They land. The other 2 go up. So we had 2, 4, 6, 8, and 2 in the air, 10. We had 10 sphere-shaped white pearl UFOs. Flight test, February 7th, 1989. Congratulations, folks. The USA has UFOs.
I would love to have you come on, Robert, and just talk to us a whole lot about the secret space program. Would you be willing to do that?
Oh, happy to. We're finishing up the video. It's so good that we didn't put it out because so much came in train, you know. Something happened like the Google thing, you know, God works through Google.
Yeah.
More films. And you know, on your show and others, I've been encouraging people to go into it, get into it, go into the archives, dig in, tear in. 1,000,000 eyes is better than just 2, 3, 4, even 100. And people have listened. And on YouTube, tremendous number of really great leakers. And they want to be anonymous. Fine. I'll be their spokesman. One is named Luna Cognita.
I have seen that channel, yeah.
The other guy is called Dark Sky Watcher 74.
Yes.
He's got really good stuff. I do like Third Phase of the Moon, although they're now moving into infotainment. Those first year or 2, they were really on. And I still like the infotainment. It's all infotainment nowadays, you know. If they're not listening here for entertainment, what are they?
Exactly.
Except we're giving them the facts.
Right.
Really.
This is serious entertainment.
It's entertainment. The truth is entertaining.
Yes.
There's nothing more satisfying than the truth. So great to see you fellas, and I do hope we meet in person sometime, maybe in spring or summer next year.
Absolutely.
Head down south and start promoting my double and triple disc frisbee and these are sports that expand your consciousness. Another
you were
one,
saying the last time, yeah.
Yes. Oh, I'm so proud of my students this year. I have a core group, and they've been working at it for 17 years, 24 years, and you know, we're in our 50s. They're my younger guys. They're in their 50s, and they're as athletic, more athletic than people in their 20s and 30s.
Is that right?
Oh, really good body mechanics. I have people that catch 3 frisbees with one hand.
Okay.
You put 3 together and you throw them, and they go, and you have to find out that pattern. And there's a way of going, whoop, and you've got 3 in your hand. And the double is standard. You know, catch 1 with each hand, 2 with one hand. And what it does is it expands your consciousness on a physical level. And then there's Thunderball, which is a hyperdimensional sport that's played with balls, and we throw 1, 2, 3, or 4 or 5 at a time. And you have to receive and return naturally and spontaneously. And people have seen it, and they said, I can't believe it. That's like the Matrix. But yeah, I said the Matrix with no computers.
Do you have any DVDs on this or any...
we have some YouTubes that are coming out.
Yeah, I'd love to see it.
I'll send you some. We're collecting them as we go along. Some of them are posted on my Facebook page. And
okay.
Yeah. So I do want to turn, you know, our direction to this positive thing. You know, life is
absolutely
good. Life is great, you know, and this is a great day in history for the people who've heard the show. Folks, I've found the missing frames of the Zapruder film. This is the end of the history that's been foisted on you, and we're getting to reality. And I'm proud to say my reality is reality.
Rob, it's been such a good time.
It is. And we'll be together again, okay?
We will.
Call me anytime.
I will. Have a great evening.
In a couple of months, we can do things. Anything new I find, I'll send you.
Great.
Good to see you, Al.
Okay, Robert.
All right, Robert.
Take care.
Bye-bye now. And that concludes our interview with Robert Morningstar, and I hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did. We're looking forward to having Robert back on the show in the very near future to talk to us about the secret space program. And as always, I'd like to thank everyone for listening and visiting the blog, The Sage of Quay. And if you get a moment, please visit laboroflovemusic.com to listen to my album, Leaving Dystopia. And remember, live in truth, and always serve creation. It's really that simple. See everyone next week. Be safe, enjoy, and God bless.
Just a cog because you're on. Yeah, you're on. You work a job just to survive. You have a pulse, but you're not alive because you're on. Welcome to the machine.